The brazier was iron and it was hot enough to take the skin off my hands, and I picked it up anyway, because there was a child on the floor of that hall who had not worn her own face in 4 months, and I had finally worked out why. 400 people watched me carry a burning brazier the length of the great hall of Amberfell, with my palms cooking against the metal, and not one of them understood what they were looking at, and I did not have the breath to explain it, because I had already breathed too much of what was coming off it. I got it to the doors, I got it out into the clean air of the yard. And I turned around, with my hands ruined and my voice already going, to watch a little grey wolf on the flagstones of that hall begin, very slowly, to remember how to be a girl. Behind me a king, who had not been able to touch his own daughter in 4 months, made a sound I have never heard a grown man make. 11 weeks earlier, a pup had come out of nowhere and fallen asleep in my lap at the market, and I had not the faintest idea whose he was. My name is Ingrid, and I sell herbs at Larkfield Market, which is the market town below Amberfell Keep, and I had been selling them there for 6 years and expected to sell them there for 60 more. I was 28 that spring, an omega, unbonded, no house, no family left. My mother taught me the herbs, and then died of the thing none of the herbs can touch, and I kept the stall on because it was hers, and because I am quiet, and it suited me. I have always been quiet. Not shy, quiet, there is a difference, and it took me most of my life to learn it. Shy is frightened. Quiet is just a person who has decided that most of what could be said does not need to be. I mention it because the whole of this story turns on me being the sort of person that a frightened thing will come to. Now, I have to tell you one thing about shifter children, and then I will get to the pup. A wolf child is born able to shift, and cannot control it and learns, the way any child learns anything, slowly, over years. Mostly by being calm enough, often enough, that the human shape becomes the one that feels like home. A settled child holds her human face nearly all the time by 4 or 5. An unsettled one shifts when she is frightened, the way a child that age cries. And a badly frightened one, a child who has had something happen to her, can lock. She goes to the wolf, and the wolf becomes the safe shape, the hiding shape, and she will not come back. Not because she cannot, but because being a girl is where the frightening thing happened. And the wolf is where it did not. Everyone in the north knows this. It is not secret law. I only tell you because I had known it since I was small, and I had known it from the inside, and I had still not seen it when it was sitting in my lap, because you never do see the thing you have decided is behind you. The pup came on a Tuesday. I did not see him arrive. I was weighing feverfew for the miller's wife, and there was a commotion 4 stalls down, shouting, a dog knocked a trestle over, somebody laughed, and by the time I looked up there was a wolf pup under my cart. Not a dog. A wolf, and a young one, thin, grey, with an expression on his small face of such complete and furious exhaustion that I did the thing I always do with a frightened creature. Which is nothing at all. I did not reach for him, I did not speak to him. I went back to weighing feverfew, and I let him decide. He came out in about a quarter of an hour and put himself against my ankle, and by noon he was in my lap, and by the middle of the afternoon he was asleep, properly asleep, boneless, the sleep of something that has not slept in a very long time. And I had a market to run and a pup in my apron, and no idea what to do about either. The guards came at about the 3rd hour. 4 of them, from the keep, in Amberfell grey, and they were not gentle and they were not calm, and the moment the first one reached for the pup, the small warm weight in my lap became a snarling grey knot of teeth that took the man's glove off and drew blood through it. They tried for an hour. 4 trained men. The pup would not be taken, and, this is the part I did not understand until much later, the pup would not leave me, specifically, would put himself between me and them, and stand his ground on legs that could barely hold him. So they went for someone senior, and I sat against my cartwheel with a wolf pup guarding my lap in a market square. And somewhere in the 4th hour, having been awake since before dawn and having a warm weight against me and a spring sun on my face, I did a thing I am still embarrassed about. I fell asleep. I woke up because the market had gone quiet, and the market never goes quiet. And I opened my eyes against the cartwheel to find the entire square on its knees and a man standing over me that I had never seen and did not need to be told about. He was enormous and still, and he was looking down at the pup asleep in my lap with an expression I had no name for at the time and have thought about every day since, the specific, careful, unbearable stillness of a man who has been handed a thing he stopped letting himself want. He had been standing there, I found out later, for some time, long enough that his own guard had begun to shift on their feet. He had come himself in the end because nobody else could take the pup, and he had arrived to find the pup and the herb woman both asleep against a cartwheel in the sun. And he had not woken us. He crouched down. Slowly, and he did not reach for the pup either, I noticed that, even half asleep, and it was the first thing I ever liked about him, and he said, very quietly, so as not to wake the child, "How long has she been asleep?" She. That was the first thing I learned. The pup was a girl. Since about noon, Your Grace. I did not know he was Your Grace. I said it because everyone around me was on their knees, and it seemed a safe guess. She hasn't stirred. She's exhausted, this one. When did she last sleep? And King Rurik of Amberfell looked at his sleeping daughter in a stranger's lap and said, I don't know. She sleeps as the wolf now. In the daytime, he stopped. She has not slept like this, not since the winter. I did not understand what I was looking at. I want to be clear about that, because the story only works if you know that I sat there with the answer literally asleep against me for 11 weeks before I saw it. I thought I had a frightened pup who liked me. That is all. Children like me, it is the one thing I have ever been reliably good at, being a safe, quiet place for a small thing to put itself. What I actually had was a shift-locked heir who had not held her human shape in 4 months, asleep, as a girl would sleep, deep and boneless and safe, for the first time since it happened, in the middle of a market, 4 stalls from where a dog had knocked over a trestle. He asked me to come to the keep. I said no. I want that on the record because everyone assumes I leapt at it. I said no. I had a stall, and I was an omega with no house, and a woman like me does not go up to a keep to be near a king and come back down with her reputation intact, and I said all of that plainly to his face, while his daughter slept in my lap. He did not press me. He said, then, may I bring her to the market? And I said that a market is a public square and I could hardly stop the King of Amberfell using it, and he almost smiled, and that was the beginning of it. She came every day, not with the king, at first with Haldor, his second, an enormous grey man who carried a shift-locked wolf pup down to a market town every morning with the grim tenderness of a soldier who has been given the one duty he cannot fight his way through. He would set her down at my stall and she would go straight into my apron and stay there until dusk, and he would stand a little way off and watch, and say almost nothing. She won't take milk from the nurses, he told me in the 2nd week. She takes it from you. She takes it because I don't watch her drink it. I was potting salve. You're all watching her every second. She can feel it. Nobody can settle with 6 people waiting for them to settle. Haldor looked at me for a long moment and then went and stood considerably further away, which I have always respected him for. The king came on the 9th day and every day after. He was terrible at it. I want to be honest, he was a king, he did not know how to simply be somewhere, and he stood at my stall for a week, getting in the way of paying customers and unable to work out what to do with his hands. But he learned. By the 3rd week, he had stopped standing and started sitting on an upturned crate at the end of my trestle, out of the light, where his daughter could see him and I could talk to him while I worked, and he talked to me about her, because there was no one else in the world he was allowed to. Her name was Lyra. She was 4. Her mother, Yrsa, and he said the name the way you say a name you have trained yourself not to say, had died in the winter, and Lyra had been there. And since that day, the child had not once worn her own face. 4 physicians, he said. A healer from the Eastern Holdings, a woman who claims to speak to the wolf directly, who I paid a great deal of money and who told me a great deal of nothing. His hands were open on his knees. They all say the same thing in different words, that she has locked, that the human shape is where her mother is, and that until she is ready to go back to it, she will stay the wolf, and that pressing her will only drive her deeper. That I must wait and be patient, and that some children lock forever. Do you believe them? I have a 4-year-old daughter who has not spoken to me in 4 months, said the King of Amberfell, because the last time she was a girl, she watched her mother die. Yes, I believe them. It is the only explanation that does not require me to have done something wrong. I did not say anything to that. I have found that people put down the wrong idea faster if you do not fight them for it. I noticed the thing in the 4th week and I did not understand it for another 7. I noticed that she was worse in the mornings. Haldor brought her down at the same hour every day, and every day for the first hour she was tight, tense, wolf to the bone, and then she would loosen, slowly, over the morning, until by the afternoon she was nearly a settled pup, dozing, ears down. The closest thing to a calm child I ever saw her be. And then she went back up to the keep at dusk, and the next morning she came down tight again. I thought it was the walk. I thought it was the leaving me. I thought 100 things, and every one of them was wrong, and the right one was so simple that when it finally came, I had to sit down on my own crate. His wolf started coming in the 6th week, which I mention because it is the only light thing in the middle of this, and I have earned it. The king's own wolf, enormous, dark, the war-wolf of Amberfell, came down to the market one morning and lay down beside my stall and let a shift locked pup climb all over him, and it was the first time I ever saw Lyra play. Just for an afternoon. She used her father's wolf as a hill and a bolster and an entire landscape, and the king sat on his crate and watched his daughter play on the back of his own animal and did not move for 3 hours for fear of ending it. He is not permitted to do that, he said roughly, not looking at me. He knew what she needed before you did. Yes, said Rurik. He has an appalling habit of it. I did not know yet that the thing keeping Lyra in the wolf was not her grief at all. I did not know that 4 months of a child's captivity had a source and a name and a very good reason. If you want to find out what a market herb woman can see that 4 physicians could not, and what it costs to prove that a locked child was never locked at all, stay with me. What I worked out on an ordinary morning is the reason this is a story and not a sad one. I worked it out because the wind changed. That is genuinely how. There was a morning in the 7th week when the wind came off the hill instead of off the sea, down from the direction of the keep, and Lyra, who had been loosening, who had been nearly settled, went tight again in the middle of the afternoon. For no reason, in the sun, 4 stalls from where she always sat. And I lifted my head and I smelled it. Faint, under the market smells, under my own herbs. A thread of something green and wrong on the wind off the keep, and I knew it. Because it is in my trade, and because my mother had been very clear with me about it when I was small. Wolfsbane. Not much. The barest smoke of it. The kind you would burn if you wanted a smell in a room and did not want anyone to place it. Something in me went very still and very clear. Wolfsbane keeps a wolf agitated. Every herb woman in the north knows it. It is why you never plant it near a kennel. In the smoke, low and constant, it does not poison. It simply keeps the animal from ever settling, keeps the wolf near the surface, keeps a shifter's blood restless and close to the change. Lyra was not worse in the mornings because of the walk. She was worse in the mornings because she had spent the night in the keep, and she settled over the day because she was in clean market air, downwind of nothing, 4 stalls from a dog and a trestle, and a quiet woman who did not watch her drink. The child was not locked in grief. The child was being held at the surface of the change by something burning in her own nursery. Every night, for 4 months, and every physician who came to examine her came to the keep, into the same smoke, and watched a distressed child and called it grief. Because grief was what they had been told to look for. She had never locked, she had been kept from settling. And the one place in the whole territory the smoke did not reach was the one place a shift-locked child had, against all sense, chosen for herself. I did not go to the king. I want to explain that, because it would have been the easy thing. If I had gone to Rurik and said your daughter is being poisoned in her own nursery, he would have torn the keep apart in an afternoon and found a brazier and a physician's prescription and a great deal of plausible medical reasoning, and the person behind it, whoever it was, would have said, correctly, that wolfsbane smoke is a recognised calmative for distressed shifter children, that it was prescribed by a licensed physician for exactly that purpose, and that a market herb woman with a grudge and designs on the king had invented a poisoning out of a soothing incense, and they would have been believed. Because it was true. That is the horror of it. Everything they had done was defensible. So I did not go to the king. I went to find out who lit the brazier, and why, before I said one word. It was Master Kaur who lit it, the child's physician, placed in the household 4 months earlier, at the start of the winter, by the man who had recommended him. And the man who had recommended him was Lord Sten. Sten was the king's cousin, and he was the heir. That is the whole of it, and it is not complicated. Amberfell law is clear that a shifter who cannot reliably hold human form cannot hold the seat, because you cannot have a king who might be a wolf when the ambassadors arrive. A locked heir is a disqualified heir. And Lyra was 4, and her mother was dead, and if Lyra could not be a girl, then the succession did not pass to a child at all. It passed sideways, to Sten. He did not have to kill her. That is the part that has kept me awake for years. He did not need the child dead. A dead royal child is a murder and a question and an investigation. He needed her unfit. He needed a grieving little girl who could not hold her shape, examined by honest physicians and pronounced locked, and a territory that quietly, sadly, sensibly agreed that the seat could not wait on a child who might never recover. A pinch of the right smoke in a nursery, prescribed by a real physician for a real condition, and the succession would simply flow around a 4-year-old like water around a stone, and no one would ever have to do anything so crude as a crime. He had reckoned on everything except a market, because a shift-locked child does not run. That is what everyone knew, and it is why nobody questioned it. A locked child hides, a locked child goes to ground, a locked child does not escape a palace and cross a town and choose a stranger. But Lyra was not locked. Lyra was a frightened little girl, held at the surface of her own change by something she could not name, and one day the door was open. And she did the only sensible thing a suffering animal can do, which was to run downwind of the thing that was hurting her, until she found clean air and a quiet lap. Her escape was not the mystery. Her escape was the diagnosis. And I was the only person in Amberfell positioned to read it, because I was the only person who ever saw her anywhere but in the smoke. Sten moved before I was ready. He was not a fool, and a market woman asking questions about the child's physician does not go unnoticed. He called a succession hearing, properly, on entirely correct grounds, with 4 physicians' testimony in hand, to have Lyra formally examined before the full council and pronounced upon. And he arranged for the examination to happen in the great hall of the keep, where the braziers were, where they had always been, for the comfort of the child. He was going to bring a shift-locked heir into the very air that was locking her, in front of 400 witnesses, and let them watch her fail to be a girl, and call it mercy. I went to Rurik the night before. I had no choice left. The hearing was in the morning, and I could not prove a poisoning, but I could prove a pattern. And a pattern was all I had. She is better at the market, I told him, and worse at the keep, and it is not the walk, and it is not me, and it is not grief. It is the air. I need you to trust me for one morning, and I need you to do exactly one thing, and it is going to look mad, and I cannot explain it in a way the council will believe, which is why I am asking you instead of them. What thing? When she locks in that hall tomorrow, and she will, because they've built the room to make her. You let me do what I do. You don't have them stop me, whatever it looks like. I held his eyes. I am asking you to let a herb woman with no house walk into your succession hearing and touch your daughter, and I am asking you to not have me removed, and I know exactly what I am asking. He looked at me for a very long time. Why Asa used to grow heartsease, he said, which I did not understand. On the sill, for Lyra. She said it was the only thing that would make her sleep. He stood up. There has not been a living plant in that nursery since the winter. Kaur said they disturbed the child's humours. His jaw worked. You have one morning. Nobody will touch you. If you are wrong, I lose my daughter's seat in front of the whole council, and I am going to let you do it anyway, and I would like you to understand that this is the most either of us has ever trusted anyone. The hall was full, and the braziers were lit. They brought her in, and she locked before she reached the dais. I watched it happen. A small girl carried in her father's arms, going tight and grey and gone, sliding to the wolf in front of 400 people, exactly as Sten had built the room to make her. And I heard the council make the low, sad sound of men watching a thing they had already decided about. 4 physicians said their piece. Locked, grief, permanent, most likely. Unfit, certainly, in the meantime, and the meantime is where a territory lives. And then a market herb woman stood up from the back of the hall and walked toward the dais, and Lord Sten said, "This is not," and the King of Amberfell said, "Let her," in a voice that ended the sentence for good. I did not go to the child. That was the thing they all expected, and it was the thing that would have failed. I went to the brazier. I put my hands on the iron of it. It was hot. They are always hot. And I felt it take my skin the moment I lifted it, and I carried it the length of that hall, while 400 people watched a woman steal a burning brazier for reasons that made no sense to any of them, and I breathed the smoke coming off it the whole way, because you cannot carry a thing at arm's length when your hands are already ruined. I got it to the doors. I got it into the yard. I came back and I did the second one, and Haldor, who had understood, somewhere in the middle of the first, being a soldier and quick, did the other 2 without a word, and flung the windows of that hall wide to the spring wind. And then we waited. I want to tell you it was fast. It was not. A child does not come back from 4 months in a heartbeat, and for the length of about 100 slow breaths that Hall watched a grey pup on the flagstones do nothing at all. And I watched Lord Sten begin to breathe again, because he thought he had won. Then the wind came through the open windows, clean, off the hill, and the little wolf lifted her head. And she began, very slowly, in front of the entire council of Amberfell, to remember how to be a girl. It is not a comfortable thing to watch. I will not pretend it is. A shift held down for 4 months does not lift gently, and it cost her, she shook, and it hurt her, and she cried the whole way through it, the first sound anyone had heard from her since the winter. But she came, bone by bone, in the clean air, in front of 400 people. A 4-year-old came back into her own face. And the first thing she did with it was look around that terrible hall full of strangers for the one thing she trusted, and find me, and hold out both her arms. I could not pick her up. My hands were gone. So I sat down on the floor of the great hall of Amberfell and let her climb into my lap the way she had at the market. And she put her wet face against me and said, in a small, cracked voice that had not made a human word in 4 months, it stopped. Behind me, the King of Amberfell made the sound I told you about, and I am not going to describe it, because it is his. Sten did not run. There is nowhere in a full hall to run to, and he was too clever to try. He stood at the dais and said, quite steadily, that this proved nothing, that the child had rallied, that children do, that a woman burning her hands on braziers was a piece of theatre and not a medical finding. He was right that it proved nothing. That is the thing about a defensible crime. The crime remains defensible even when it stops working. It was Master Core who ended him, and Core did it to save himself, which is how these things usually end. Offered the choice between a cousin's cause and his own neck, the physician produced the prescription in Sten's own hand, the instruction to maintain the brazier, in those words, maintain, which is not a word you use about a treatment you expect to cure anything. You do not maintain a cure. You maintain a condition. That one word hanged him. Not my hands, not the wind, not the child crying in my lap. A cousin who wrote maintain on a page because he was certain no one would ever read it against him. The cost was real, and I will not skip it. My hands are scarred. I have most of the use of them, and I lost some, and there are fine things I did with herbs that I do not do anymore, and I have made my peace with it. That is the smaller cost. The larger one is my voice. I breathed too much of that smoke, carrying 2 braziers the length of a hall, and it did something to my throat that never entirely mended, and I speak now with a rasp that I did not have at 8 and 20. A quiet Omega who was already quiet, made quieter. There is a joke in that somewhere, and I have never quite been able to find it funny. Rurik asked me in the autumn, and he did it the way I had come to expect of him, which is to say correctly. He came to the market. Not to the keep, not to a hall, to Larkfield, to my mother's stall on an ordinary morning, and he brought no guard I could see, and no gift at all. I have thought a long time about how to do this, he said, and every version was a king asking a subject. And I could not make it be anything else, so I have removed the part where you are my subject. He put a paper on my trestle. It was a grant, the market rights of Larkfield, the whole square, mine outright, in perpetuity, answerable to no one, in recognition of service to the crown, signed and sealed and countersigned so that he could not take it back. You do not depend on me now. Your stall is yours, your square is yours, and if you tell me to go, nothing changes tomorrow. I made certain of that before I let myself come. You've made me a landholder to ask me a question. I have made you a woman who can say no to a king, said Rurik of Amberfell. It is the only honest way I could think of to ask, and it took me until the autumn. And Haldor says I am a coward, and he is correct. I kissed him first at my mother's stall in the market, with my ruined hands and my ruined voice, and a 4-year-old asleep in a basket under the trestle. It was brief, and it was warm, and it settled something in me that had been braced since the winter my mother died, and I decided most things did not need to be said. 3 years on, Lyra is 7, and she holds her own face all day, and shifts when she is delighted, which the healers tell me is the right order of things, and she has never once locked again. There is heartsease on every sill in the nursery. There is heartsease on every sill in the keep. In fact, Rurik will not have a window without it, and the gardeners have given up arguing, and the council thinks it a charming eccentricity of a sentimental king, and does not know it is a sentry. I still keep the stall, my rasp and all. I am at Larkfield 3 mornings of the week, and I will not give it up, and Lyra comes down with me most of those mornings, and sells feverfew to the miller's wife with enormous seriousness, and gives short weight to no one, which she is very proud of. Master Core lives. He gave evidence, and it saved him, and I do not begrudge it. A man who is only a tool is still the reason the harm happened. And he knows it, and he runs the physician's school at Amberfell now under a rule he wrote himself, which is that no treatment may be prescribed to a royal child that a second physician, chosen by the child's own household and not by the crown, has not confirmed. It is a good rule. It is called Core's rule, and it should be called Lyra's, and I have said so, and lost. The king's wolf still comes to the market. He has a place by my stall worn into the ground. Lyra rides him down the hill on the mornings she is allowed to, which is fewer than she would like, and there is a running argument in that family about it, that I stay out of. I still wonder about the 4 physicians. That is the honest end of this. Not Sten. Sten wanted a seat and did a monstrous thing quietly to get it, and there is no mystery in that. The 4 physicians. Every one of them was honest. Every one of them examined a distressed child in a smoke-filled room and saw grief, because grief was what they had been told to see, and not one of them thought to ask why the child was calm at a market and wild at home. They were not fools, and they were not bought. They simply looked at the thing they had already been told was there. Tell me in the comments how many of us would have done any different. I have a rasp for the rest of my life because I happened to be downwind on the right morning, and I do not think that makes me cleverer than 4 physicians. I think it makes me luckier. Comment the Heartsease if you want to hear what Rurik's wolf did the first time Lyra tried to plant a windowsill herself. And if you want more nights like this one, a king who was told to be patient while his child was quietly taken from him, a little girl whose escape was the diagnosis nobody read, and a quiet woman who was only ever downwind at the right time. Stay close. There is more of Amberfell left to tell. Where are you listening from tonight? I would love to know.